I know I've said it before, that there's always something about one of the readings or the psalm or the gospel that kind of jumps out at me as I'm preparing as I look at the readings any week, but certainly as I'm preparing a homily. And this week it was that last line, or the first line. The Spirit drove Jesus into the desert, and he remained in the desert for 40 days, tempted by Satan. And it was the thing that jumped out at me because it made me ask some questions to myself. Questions I would bet many people do ask as they reflect on these passages and specifically on this gospel. First question was, what does this mean? What is it trying to tell me? And then there were the other more obvious questions, like, why would the Spirit, why would God, drive Jesus out into the desert? And of course, why did he stay there for 40 days? And I'm sure there are many, many more questions that anyone might ask. But as I was preparing for this weekend, there were two sets of circumstances in my life that gave this simple passage a very significant meaning for me, much more than just questions to reflect on. First, it made me think about being on retreat, the times when I'm blessed enough to get away by myself for a little while, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, away to pray, to fast, and to focus on my relationship with God and with Jesus. And it occurred to me that every time that I've been on retreat, every time I've had that opportunity to pray, and to fast, to work on my relationship with God, Satan always seems to show up. Satan always seems to show up, and no doubt in my mind, to distract me, to interfere with my prayer, and I lose track of God and Jesus and that relationship. Sometimes it's only for a minute. Sometimes it's for the whole retreat. But as I reflected on that parallel in my life between my time on retreat and Jesus' 40 days in the desert, I found myself asking some more questions. Questions like, is that why the Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert? So that as he was focusing on his relationship with God, he could also be distracted, so that that relationship would grow stronger as he fought off the distractions. Or did he go there simply to be tempted? Tempted to go the other way, tempted to do something other than what he knew he was here for. Now, I do realize that I will never know the answers to these questions, or any other question that comes to mind about why Jesus did many of the things he did. Or we reflect on any passage that we might hear at Mass. But I do know, and I've learned from personal experience, that when I'm fortunate enough, and I believe when anybody's fortunate enough, to be able to draw parallels between our own lives and the readings or the Psalms or the gospel passages, we are blessed. We are blessed because it gives us a chance to grow in that relationship. I just have to believe that Jesus used his time in the desert, much like I try to use my time when I'm on retreat. Sure, he was more successful, but time to build that relationship. The second reason that this passage had special significance for me is that for the past 6 months or so, as Father Joe mentioned at the very beginning of Mass, I have been blessed to be journeying with 4 young people, 4 young adults, who have been working on a very important journey in their own life, in their own journey of faith, to enter into a deeper relationship with God. If all goes according to plan, come Easter, or a few days thereafter, they will be welcomed into the church, fully participating as members of our congregation. But they have been on a journey out of the desert, and not the kind of desert that we think of when it's sandy and you need a camel to get around, but a desert because there was something missing in their lives that drew them to the church, that drew them to God, and drew them to Jesus Christ. As I've journeyed with them over these months, I've been blessed to witness that relationship with God and with Jesus grow, in much the same way that my relationship with God and with Jesus has grown during my retreats. Watching their growth over the months has given me a fresh perspective on how to live Lent this year. A perspective that tells me, not unlike what Father Joe said right at the beginning of Mass about the passenger that was on that plane that was coming apart midair, to focus on what's important, to set aside the frustrations that come from everyday life and really focus or refocus on my relationship with God and with Jesus. Remembering that everything I have, including my very life, is a gift from God. And remembering that as it is a gift, I am simply God's steward over those gifts while I'm here on earth. So as our Lenten journey continues for the next 6 weeks or so, I ask first that you pray for our candidates and catechumens as their journey continues, that they are able to see and recognize where God is working in their lives. I also ask you to think about and reflect on the times in your own life when you experienced some emptiness, times when you may have felt like you were alone and in a desert. And look for any parallels that might exist between your life in those experiences and Jesus' 40 days in the desert. And ask yourself, during that time, when you were feeling empty and in the desert, did you allow Satan to tempt and distract you and pull you away from God? Or did you use that time to fight off the temptations, to allow your relationship with God and with Jesus to grow stronger? And I think if we can all focus on that, or if any of us have the opportunity to focus on that during the rest of Lent, when Easter comes, it'll be that much more glorious.